Rugby 2018 season preview for the Reds. For the first time in a long time, we're talking about the Reds and not with a sense of boredom or frustration. There's a wee bit of excitement around Ballymore and Suncorp. Brad Thorn's in charge now, and he is shaking things up. That is for sure. It's very much a rebuild. Out with the old, in with the new, in with the young is definitely the philosophy of what Brad's got going. So, in terms of the initial transfers, like guys who have gone, Talakai, the prop's gone to the Rebels, Hendrick Tui's gone to Japan, Rob Simmons has gone to the Tars, and Stephen Moore retired. To be fair, Stephen Moore had been he'd not been the Stephen Moore of old for a few years now, so it's good that he didn't push it too long, and good that he got that final season with the Reds, but we're definitely moving on now from that era. The two bigger ones are still on the board, but I'll get to them later. So who's left? Who's made Brad Thorn's squad? Queensland Country from the NRC will become a pretty common theme with these names. So in the front row, Reedy, Paenga, Amosa, Mafi, Fa'angase, Tupo, JP Smith, Slipper, Vansati, and Hoopert. So, I mean, some of the names you remember from last year. Reedy's still around. He got in a bit of trouble for drinking last season, so kind of a disciplinary issue. He was always really niggly when he played the Blues, and their scrum was really dominant over the Blues, so never really liked that guy, but he's still in the squad, so we'll see how he goes. Panga Amosa is a newcomer to the squad. He's only 23, and apparently he is full of power, so we'll see if he gets a game. Mafi last year played a bit, and he seemed pretty ordinary, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of 1, 2, 3 in that order of selection. Fangase, he is a kind of solid defensive prop. He does good around the park. Taniela Tupou, also known as the Tongan Thor. He's dynamic. He kind of made the internet a sensation, was an internet sensation, went viral when he was a schoolboy and just running through people who were a lot smaller than him. Hasn't had that quite same impact at the senior level, but he's still very young and still has a long way to go. So very much a dynamic style prop. JP Smith, he's back in Australia. Good hands for a prop. He seems like a bit of a character, so he's a good guy to have. Slipper is definitely the senior man in this lineup. I mean, he's 28. All these other guys are like 24, 23, 22, 26 is kind of old. So 28, yeah, he's the senior guy. Slipper's always been good around the park. He's been loyal to Queensland, so I mean, he's been captain. He's definitely a good guy to have around. Vansanti played some games last season and didn't don't want to say didn't impress, but he didn't set the world on fire. He was fine, and Hoopert is like a 20-year-old prospect. So a fair mix of some young blood and senior-ish kind of guys, but definitely a lot of potential there. Not so much focusing, like I was talking about Reedy when he was being niggly with the Blues. That was a few years ago when the Reds were just shockingly awful, but they had a really good scrum, and they would just demolish people at scrum, get scrum penalties, and then do nothing. And then, they've moved away from that with a bunch of guys who are guys who can do more than just scrum the ball. They are definitely kind of ball handling, dynamic, kind of free flowing around the park, front rowers as much as you can be. So in the locks and loose forwards, Douglas, Tui, Rhoda, Hawkins, Blythe, Higginbotham, George Smith, Gunn, Hewitt, Timu, Korzik, Wright, and Scott Young. So again, a fair mix of a few older guys with a lot of young talent. Kane Douglas is still around. He's a guy who I wish someone would tell him, you are a large human being. And if you want to, you can bully people smaller than you, push them out of your way. But he never seems to get it. He always doesn't seem to do what a guy his size should do. But I still feel like when I look at him and his big bearded, grizzled face, like he should be able to do it. I don't know. Tui, on the other hand, is a guy who didn't have any problem doing that kind of thing last season. He is very, very good at using his size and looks for work. So that's the kind of guy you want in your team. Rhoda, he's a new Wallaby. So I think so is Tui. So they're both kind of young, they're 21. Definitely on the radar for Australian rugby going forward. Hawkins and Blythe, both even younger, if you can imagine, like 19 and I think 20. But like Hawkins is 206 centimeters, so he is a very tall guy. He should be good in the lineup, I would imagine. And if he also throws his weight around, he could be, I mean, not a skeleton, but he could be a guy who causes some damage, kind of wrecking ball style. But he doesn't look at his frame, so it's hard to know. He's rated really highly by Brad Thorn, so we'll see how he goes. In the Lucies, Higginbotham's captain this year. He's really good, isn't he? I mean, he's got really good hands. He scores a lot of tries, so many tries. He's always in the right place, the right time. Good offloads, just all-round good player. Seems smart. I think people will respect him. Good leader. I can't think of many who would be a better fit for captain in the team. George Smith, evergreen. George Smith, he's 37. You look at his stats from last year, and he's still one of the top performers in terms of like tackles and pilfers. He does give away a lot of penalties, but he's always in that kind of on the borderline of a pilfer or a penalty, isn't he? So, yeah, he recently had some legal troubles over in Japan. Apparently the club have fined him. I haven't heard any further news about that, so I'm assuming he's still in line to play. Gunn is another one who got in a bit of trouble for his drinking last season, so I don't know if the new coach will hold that against him. Hewitt only got one game last season, so we didn't see a heck of a lot of him. Timo, I think he had 2 games. He's an ex-league player, so should have a bit of skills that guys who've traditionally been brought up with Union might not have. Korzik, once he kind of got over his knee injuries, if he's over them fully, is one that's touted as a future Wallaby. So it'll be one to watch kind of closely to see how many minutes he gets. Wright is uncapped. He is a 20-year-old prospect. And Scott Young is also a prospect from Queensland country. So a lot of young guys like Hawkins, Blythe, Korzik, Wright, Scott Young, all these guys, if they get some time, hopefully will develop into proper players. Even if only half of them kind of make that step up, you've still got a few big names who can support them. So I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about what's going on here. In the backs, Tuttle, Sorovi, McDermott, Lance, Lucas, Stewart, Teller, and tentatively Frisbee and Cooper. So Tuttle had a pretty good season last year. I think he was generally regarded as performing a bit better than Frisbee. He doesn't kick as much, that's for sure. Sorovi's got a nice crisp pass from what I've seen of him, which is what you really want from a halfback. And McDermott's kind of a young prospect style player. So again, I'd think 1, 2, 3, probably in starting order. The number 10 jersey is an interesting and contentious one. Frisbee and Cooper are both on the outer with Brad Thorn. Last I read with Frisbee is that he's signed a contract with Bordeaux. So he should be out of the picture. But he's still listed on the Queensland Reds official team site, so I'm not quite sure what the deal is with that. Cooper is still listed and still under contract and still getting paid the big bucks. Essentially just playing club rugby at the moment. So I know a lot of fans are kind of torn. You know, he's the guy who helped lead Queensland to its first Super Rugby title and played so many games. He's kind of an icon, legend style player with the club. And other people kind of saying, nah, he makes too many mistakes. He's too high risk and whatnot. Gives away silly penalties, that kind of thing. So yeah, definitely a love him or hate him kind of player. But he is definitely not popular with the coach. So he is He's on the squad, but he's not going to play. Who have they got at 10 then? So Jono Lance has come via the Rebels. He signed with the Rebels, but then immediately joined the Reds. I don't know what happened there. But yeah, he's injured, so I'm not sure if he's going to start the season. Lucas has come over as well. More experienced hand, kind of like Lance. Nothing outstanding, I would have thought. And Stewart's your kind of young guy. How old is he? 19, so yeah, really young. Definitely a prospect. But again, got to give him game time if they're going to improve. Teller is kind of a utility back fly half. I would imagine he will be mostly used as cover if he gets any games. And now, probably the most exciting part of the Queensland Reds team, you get your mid and your outside back. So Paiawa, Karevi, Feawai Sautia, Nabuli, Parise, Dalgunu, Hunt, and Maranta. Also possibly should be included on this list is Aiden Toa, but again, he's not on their site. So he was initially, Toa, was kind of signed as emergency cover for Hunt, who's had his troubles with the police recently. I understand that's all being dropped and resolved, so I don't know. Last I heard, he still wasn't training with the team. I'm not sure what's happening there. I think you'd rather have Hunt in your team than Toa. Toa was pretty ordinary last season for the Brumbies. In the more positive end, Paiawa is a pretty good looking prospect for Aussie rugby. He's kind of got that utility feel about him. He plays, inside centre, plays 10, plays 15, all pretty well. And he's definitely developing nicely. He played well in the games that we saw him last season. Karevi, I feel like, should be on a whole nother page because all his stats are just on a whole nother planet. He is just an amazing player. And last year he was playing in a pretty ordinary team. And yet he was still in the top 10 for line breaks. He was in the top 3 for tackle busts total. And if you talk about the average tackle busts per game, he was the number 1 guy in the whole competition. So if you're playing a fantasy Super Rugby, boom, pick Karevi because he is going to just tear it up in those stats. Yeah, he's just always beats the man, doesn't he? He just pushes them out of the way or whatever he does. So he is definitely a focal point to either build your attacks around or use as a decoy because people are going to be watching him for what he does because he's just such a special player. Feawai Sautia, he's solid. I mean, he kind of gets overshadowed by Karevi. I think he had a bit of an injury. It was also his knee last season, so we didn't get to see that much of him. Nabuli is quick. Scored, I think, the most tries for the Reds last season. Also had a few yellow cards, which was a bit disappointing. I had a look at a couple of them, a bit iffy. But, yeah, definitely the gas man. So once he gets the ball, and once he gets the full stride going, he leaves most people for dead. Parise also, very quick guy. Not so much the long stride like Nabuli, but also definitely a gas man who impressed, and he's only 20. Dalgunu's Queensland Country, again, another kind of pacey winger, not capped as far as I'm aware. And Maranta, ex-league player, played for the Broncos. So I feel like with all these other guys, he's probably a squad player. But you never know with Brad Thorn because he's really just tearing up the rule book. So what do you expect from all these young guys? It's really hard to know because, I mean, Queensland have been... I mean, they played a lot of these guys last season, so some of them have already got 1 year of Super Rugby experience under the belt, which will put them in good stead going forward. But there's not quite that composure there yet. Like, they lost quite a few games last season at the death. Like, they almost beat the Crusaders, which people forget about when they're talking about the Red season. They were at 80 minutes, they were ahead, but the Crusaders got a penalty. So, yeah. I feel like if Thorn can get them a bit more consistent, get a bit more experience in them, increase that composure kind of thing, then they could push some of the other teams. Like, people are kind of writing them off already, but after you see what Brad Thorn did with Queensland Country, I don't think you can do that. And I always back picking these young guys instead of just bringing in all old kind of not has-been stars, but bringing in big names who already know the way they want to do things. If you can bring guys up through the system, you can mold them to the way you want to play, and then you don't have to worry about reteaching or unteaching some things like habits that they've already got. So I think he's going about it the right way. I know it's a big thing to cut Cooper, but he wants a fresh start for Queensland rugby, and I can't blame him because since the Richard Graham days, it's been pretty awful. They've not been a pretty team to watch. So yeah, like I say, young squad, get their experience up. He'll probably rotate them a fair bit because you don't want to kind of get them gassed too early in the season when they're only 19 or 20. Your body's still growing at that age. Discipline, yeah, they had the most yellow cards of any team last season. Like I said, I had a look at some of their games, and some of the yellow cards they got, you kind of look at them, and if that was your team, you'd be like, oh, that's harsh. And I felt that for a lot of their yellow cards last season. So, but still, discipline needs to be worked on. Don't put yourself in that situation where you can be yellow carded. Increase your consistency. Hold on to those leads in the last minute. Stop kind of throwing it away. If he can get that kind of thing down, he's already halfway there. The set piece was moderate last season, but not outstanding. If he can improve that a touch, and he loves that kind of set piece work, yeah, that'll also add to their chances. Goal kicking last season was pretty shocking. They were in last place at 63%, but they also didn't take that many shots at goal, perhaps because their goal kicking was poor, so they couldn't rely on it. Yeah, they need to find someone who's going to kick at least at 75%, preferably 80%. And the defence has to harden up. They, again, like I said a bit with Douglas, sometimes they're just a bit soft. You can't let the opposition always get over the advantage line, and they were guilty of that a bit last season. Strength of schedule, 14th out of 15 teams, so the second easiest run. Again, with the for and against from last season, they get to play Aussie teams twice. Aussie teams did poorly last season, so they end up having a supposedly easy run. They avoid the Sharks and the Crusaders, which I must say are two teams that are probably pretty nice to be avoiding. The season starts away to the Rebels, home to the Brumbies, and home to the Bulls. I feel like those are three games which are winnable. The Rebels are another kind of restructuring, rebuilding team. You got them away, but if they haven't got everything kind of gelled in, there's a chance for these guys to go on and nick some points. Home to the Brumbies. Brumbies have got a new coach, so same thing kind of applies. And home to the Bulls, and the Bulls didn't really perform that well last season. Kind of a similar situation to the Reds. They're really rebuilding. They got a new coach, so chance to get the faithful kind of happy, get some bums on seats at Suncorp, and yeah, get a winning start. Things do get a bit harder then. They've got to go away to the Jaguares, away to the Stormers, and then they've got to bye. The real key part to their season is after that bye, because they've got the Brumbies away. You got to think the Brumbies will have their system in place by then, and you're in Canberra, which is always hard. The Waratahs away game is going to be hard, and then the Chiefs and the Lions at home, which will be two really tough games. So if they start poorly and then go into that run of 4 games, which are all pretty tough, it could be a long season. But yeah, I've got faith in Brad Thorn, so I feel like he is a man to turn everything around. I mean, he won the NRC last season with the Queensland country, so he seems to have something. He's not that old that he can really connect with his players, and he's going to command that instant respect as well. So, yep, fingers crossed they have a good season. Looking forward to watching some of these young guys and how they develop, and definitely looking forward to see Karevi busting through some tackles. Just hopefully not too many against my Blues. We'll see how they go. All right, guys. I will catch you guys another time. See you later.